Hello, today I'm going to build an edge grain charcuterie board. I started with a couple of pieces of pre-milled walnut and maple that I just bought at Home Depot. I cut them to length on my table saw using the crosscut sled. I cut them to 18 inches long because I knew I wanted the board to be a little bit less than 18 inches and I wanted to give myself a little room to work with. I just recently added this Delta table saw to my shop and I absolutely love it. Once I finished the maple, I went ahead and cut the walnut down to the exact same size. After cross-cutting, I went ahead and ripped these boards into strips. The strips are about 1 1/8 inch, which is the size of stripe that I wanted on the board. I went ahead and cut 2 of each of the 18-inch boards into strips. After I finished ripping those 1 1/8 strips, I had a couple of pieces of offcut that I wanted to cut down to smaller stripes. So I went ahead and moved my fence down and cut a couple of thinner strips down. Now, my push stick wouldn't work here because the gap was too narrow. So I went ahead and used another piece of offcut hardwood that I had to push that through. Once I had all the strips cut down, now it's just about finding the pattern that I like. I tried a couple of different options, and I finally settled on one that I really liked. Now, about halfway through this process, I was looking at it, and I realized that I wanted something else a little bit, just a tiny more pop of color. So I went ahead and replaced that middle thin strip with a piece of Ipe that I had. Once I got the design that I liked and I knew it was the right size that I wanted, I went ahead and flipped all of the boards down so that I could get their glue edges facing up. I'm using Titebond 3 here, and I made sure that I gave everything a really, really good coat. Too much glue is a much better problem than not enough. I brush it down just so that every spot on the boards got covered in glue. Titebond 3 is a really good glue to use for this because it is food safe and waterproof. So if the board ever gets washed or something like that, it's not going to cause problems. Now that everything's glued up, I'm going to flip those boards back up into the original design and get these clamps closed up. Make sure that everything is nice and straight and everything is aligned properly. Once the clamps are tight, I'm going to go ahead and get a wet rag and wipe up all of that excess glue. It's about 90 minutes later. I'm going to take it out of the clamp. It's good and dry, and I'm going to make sure that there's no cupping. Sometimes if your clamps are too tight, that can happen. I'm running it through the planer to make sure that everything is nice and smooth and there's no unevenness in the joints where the wood comes together. And back to the table saw, I'm going to trim off the ends to make sure that it's nice and straight. Also, I'm going to get out my speed square and check square on all the corners just to make sure my crosscut sled is nice and square, but I just have to double check. Now I'm sanding the board. I'm going to sand all of the sides of it, starting with 80 grit, and then I'm going to move through the grits. I'm going to go from 80 to 150 to 220. A good rule of thumb is to use a pencil. Make sure you use a mechanical pencil and draw some squiggly lines on the board, and you know that you're done with that particular grit once all the pencil lines are gone. Make sure to get those edges. On the edges where it's end grain, they're going to actually have to spend a little bit more time. I've got this rubber drawer liner that came with an old tool chest, and it's really great for setting pieces on to make sure that they don't slide around when you're sanding. Gives just the right amount of grip and protection from the work surface. Okay, now I'm going to use my router and a chamfer bit to just put a slight chamfer on all of the edges just to make sure that it's got a really nice sleek look. It's important to do the end first so that if you get any chip out, you can come back and correct it later. Now I'm wetting the board down just to make that grain pop back up. It's going to feel a little fuzzy after a while, and that way the first time the board's washed, it's not going to lose that smoothness. It's hot. Now the board's nice and dry. I'm going to give it one final sanding with 220 grit paper. And I'm going to go through, make sure that everything is nice and smooth. We use that pencil trick again, and make sure that it just feels perfect. Now I'm going to give it a coat of board butter. My board butter is a 4-to-1 ratio of mineral oil and beeswax. Whenever I sell or give a board as a gift, I always give a little jar of the board butter so that they can treat it and condition it if needed. Now, using a little template that I made, I'm going to pre-drill some holes in the corner just so that I don't have any chance of splitting the wood, and install some rubber feet. Make sure that if you're going to do this, you use stainless steel screws just so that they don't have any chance of rusting or causing problems. And there you have it, a maple and walnut charcuterie board. I really like the way this one turned out. Please like and subscribe if I've earned it, and let me know what you think in the comments. See you next time.